Hi, I'm Simon K. Jones, and you're listening to the latest chapter of Tales from the Triverse, my ongoing science fiction fantasy detective serial. This week we're taking a slight diversion to catch up with somebody we've not heard from in a while. Today's chapter is called Overreach. Space, somewhere in lunar orbit, 2550, March, Earth time. Charles Matheson was having a good year. A good decade, in fact. Other men may have paused to wonder at their good fortune, but to Matheson it was an inevitability, and well-deserved. He'd seized not only his own destiny, but that of the entire solar system, and the wider Triverse. One day they would thank him. His descendants would look at statues and whisper his name in awe, marvelling at his achievements. "He changed everything," they would say. It had taken decades of his life, had required mammoth investment of resources, but the gamble had been worth it. True freedom was within their grasp for the first time in centuries. A return to human-led ingenuity and self-determination. The fight was for no less than the sovereignty of the soul. As a species, they'd collectively sold themselves down the river, first to the censors, then to the liberal utopians, then to AI super-intelligences. All of them were comfortable, were fed, had an income. Everyone was supported. It had been a disaster. Mundanity by policy, ideological homogeneity. Everyone was special, so no one was special. It was anathema to Matheson. He came from a long, proud lineage that had forged their own path since landing on the shores of the New World. Mathesons had built towns, had built America, then seen it subsumed into the global government. The long, drawn-out death rattle of libertarianism had happened before Charles Matheson had been born, but he'd felt its echoes every day of his life. This office, far from Earth, had long been a refuge from the carnage of the 26th century, a space all his own, free from the observations of superintelligences and the judgment of others. The AIs had brought a tedious stability to the system, the great flattening, as Pearson had called it in The Plunge. It was a shame that the great writer had not lived to see his vision come to pass. It had taken 2 centuries, but the opening of the Triverse had finally shaken things up to such an extent that they were ready. A grenade thrown into a still pond, the portals had delivered a chaos that had been most fortuitous. Most evidently in the opportunity to build a new AI, designed this time to serve humans, a better AI that they had harnessed to start unpicking all the mistakes of the past. In only 5 years they'd made such progress, rebalancing the interplanetary economy, peeling away at the bloated bureaucracy of the global government, rolling back universal income, stripping away the regulations that had held back efforts to make use of the near-infinite resources held in the soil of Mars and Venus and the other satellites. They'd moved so fast, aided by their personal, unshackled quantum superintelligence, that the other AIs hadn't known how to react. The legacy AIs' finely tuned, algorithmic slave management of humanity had finally been disrupted. They'd had no choice but to acquiesce for fear of a total meltdown of the entire system. Piece by piece, it was all slotting into place, and there'd be no going back. Matheson glanced at the inert host in the corner of the office. The robot stood to attention, eyes closed. Probably better, was busy with its assigned tasks, elsewhere in the system, doing what it was told. The drone was in the form of a beautiful woman, in her mid-20s, as was Matheson's preference. If he had to put up with an AI's presence, even one of their own design, he at least wanted it to be a pleasant vision. Earlier that evening he'd dressed the host in a figure-hugging red dress ready for the party. Not that he was expecting a need for probably better's presence. His comms beeped, announcing an incoming call from Hamilton Gordon. The Joint Council's Secretary-General was a necessary ally, though the time would come for them to cut him out of the picture. Wait for the right timing, then Hutchinson could take over the position and provide a more solid base. Hamilton Gordon did what he was told, but Matheson had never felt entirely convinced by his ideological clarity. "Secretary General," Matheson said, bringing up the call. The other man was sat in the plush seat of a private vessel. There was a pause of a second or two before the reply, suggesting his impending guest was still several hours away. "Ambassador Matheson." Hamilton Gordon smiled broadly. "Charles. Good to be able to speak directly without having to shuffle messages back and forth through the damned portal." "Only thing getting between us now is the speed of light, Paul," Matheson said, flashing his perfect grin. "You looking forward to the fundraiser?" "Eminently. Are all of our selected guests confirmed?" "Absolutely. Once we've got them all on side, there'll be no stopping us." "Excellent. I have the paperwork for the Joint Council amendments ready my end. Nearly there, then." Matheson's eyes flicked to the inert robot in the corner of the room. "Not long indeed, and then we can move to Phase 3. Phase 3, when they'd no longer need their custom-built AI and could send the deactivation code that would propagate back into the network and cripple every superintelligence in the system. And then there would be no gods over them. The only masters of humans would be humans. Probably better had been a necessary loose screw rattling around inside the engine, but they had designed it from the start with an expiry. They'd succeeded in harnessing an AI for the benefit of humanity, unlike those naive, sleepwalking pioneers of the 21st and 22nd centuries. A new era was upon them, where success and the fruits of one's labours could be rewarded and enjoyed, and where failure was, once again, a possibility. Civilizations couldn't prosper with a safety net in place, where competition was frowned upon. In a society with no losers, by definition, there would also be no winners. The inadequate and the incapable and the scroungers had to be allowed to fail. That's how progress worked. Those who contribute least fall to the bottom of the pile and get crushed. The weak die off without polluting the strong. Matheson had always felt like a winner. The universe had, finally, caught up with his ambitions. "I'll see you in a few hours." Hamilton Gordon broke the connection. Standing and moving around his desk, Matheson crossed the office to the robot host. He'd had its face designed as a blend of several famous actresses from the 20th century. Running a hand from the robot's waist up to its neck, over its uncannily realistic skin, he briefly regretted that they would be disposing of probably better. But then any generic, non-quantum AI could pilot the host, like any of the waiters in the galleries. Too much intelligence could be a dangerous thing. He needed to get ready. The first guests would be arriving soon enough, and he had to convince them to join him in the reshaped universe. Thanks for listening. You can leave comments, read other chapters, and find out lots more about Triverse over on the newsletter at simonkjones.substack.com. I'll see you next week.